Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today I have an updated Urgot build and rune guide for you for this mid-season patch. Before we jump into full builds, I want to cover runes and boot options. Also, when I'm talking about builds, I'm not counting boots as an item, so if I say 5th item, that means it's the last item in the build. Also, I want to give a quick disclaimer. I do think other builds and items can work, but in this video, I want to cover the main builds that I do that have felt good and helped me climb. But there are a lot of items that work on Urgot that I don't build that other Urgots might have success with. I do think Urgot is a champion that's very diverse in builds because he scales off levels very well. Anyways, let's get into the video. So for runes on Urgot, this is a good all-around page. If you're playing versus a ranged champion and you find it hard to proc press the attack, then you can switch this for fleet footwork. And fleet footwork is nice because it gives you a lot of healing late game and also movement speed for proccing your shotguns. Primary, or the rest of the primary page always stays the same in the minor runes. I always go for these three. And then for secondary, we have quite a few options. Demolish is really good into tanks. You can just play for platings. I never go Shield Bash or Fawn of Life. And then for the second row, Conditioning is a really nice scaling, kind of greedy option, especially if you're playing against tanks again. Second Wind is just a nice all-around rune. It gives you a bunch of healing. And Urgot lacks Sustain, so this makes your lane phase a lot easier. And then for Bone Plating, I'll take this into very specific matchups, like Renekton, Riven, and like Garen. Like, it has to be champions that don't have a way to proc it from a distance. They have to run into you, and I also like it versus champions that have like really quick combos like Riven, because then you get a lot of value out of it. For the third row, I pretty much always go Overgrowth. If they have a ton of CC, I'll go Unflinching sometimes. I used to go Unflinching a little bit more, but now with Sterak's giving Tenacity, I try to go for the Overgrowth, which also helps out the Sterak shield, which is really nice. And then for the rune shards, I always go double adaptive plus armor. Sometimes I'll go HP if I want to be greedy, and I'm just going more of a scaling build. And HP with Conditioning is pretty nice too, because then you get resist and then a bunch of HP here. And then also MR if I'm versus an AP champion. So for boot options, we have Plated Steel Caps, Boots of Swiftness, and Mercury Treads. I put these in order of how common I buy them. Plated Steel Caps are the most common because ADCs are really strong right now, and they usually also help with my lane phase since I'm mostly against like AD auto attackers. I'll go Boots of Swiftness when I need to dodge skill shots, and also sometimes you have enough for Swifties but not enough for Steel Caps or Merc Treads, so it can be good to upgrade your boots on that back instead of waiting for your next back. Mercury Treads I only buy if they have a ton of CC, since I also go Legend Tenacity every game, and also Sterak's gives Tenacity once the shield pops now, so Mercury Treads are a less common buy for me. So for build number 1, which is more of a carry damage build, you're going to want to go Black Cleaver first, Yumu's Ghostblade second as your mythic, Sterak's Gage third, Spirit Visage fourth, and then Randuin's Omen 5th and final item. So the first 3 items are the core build, so those never change. The last 2 items are pretty situational. I'll quickly go through each item, why I think it's really good, and then also on the last 2 items, I'll provide situational options for those, where other items could be better. So first up, we have Black Cleaver. This is an item that I build 95% of the time as my first item in both of my builds that I do. The only time where I don't go Cleaver first is if I want to get a Maw, and that's against champions like Mordekaiser, Gwen, and Akali. Other than that, I always rush Black Cleaver first. It's really good on Urgot because you stack it up very quickly with your W. Every time you apply those Cleaver stacks, it's going to be shredding the enemy's armor, which helps not only you, but also your team out. Also, it gives you movement speed, so you can proc your shotgun knees quicker around people, and it also helps you with getting kited less. Next up in the build is Yumu's Ghostblade, and this is basically the Prowler's Claw replacement since they made that item a legendary. Yumu's is nice because it gives you a bunch of lethality, gives you a bunch of damage, and it gives you a bunch of movement speed. Those are 3 stats that are really good for carrying games on Urgot. The way this item works is when you move around, it generates stacks, and once you get 100 stacks, when you enter combat for the first 3 seconds, you'll get a lethality boost depending on your level. So this is nice on Urgot because when you have those 100 stacks, you can E somebody and you get a ton of lethality for those first 3 seconds. The Yamu's active also helps you get in range to E somebody. And also keep in mind, you want to try to get pretty close before you use your Q on them, because normally you want to use your Q to get into E range, but try to get a little bit close with the Yumu's active before you Q, because the second you Q, you're going into combat with them, so that 3 seconds is going to start ticking down where you get that lethality boost. So ideally, you can pop your Yumu's, get pretty close to them, hit a Q, to get in range to use your ER combo while you have your W on, and then just circle around them with W and pop your shotguns really quick. The active can also be really nice for getting out of ganks if you're split pushing and like playing on the side lane a lot. And the item also just gives you a lot of out of combat movement speed, so this is really nice for getting to side lanes quicker and also just rotating for like a Dragon or Baron if you have to team fight. It does, however, leave you a little bit squishy, and that's why our next item in this build is going to be Sterak's Gauge. And Sterak's Gauge is just amazing on this patch. I thought this item was already good last patch, but then they buffed it. So now when the Sterak shield pops, you get increased sized, and you also get 30% tenacity for 8 seconds, which is so amazing on Urgot, since he really struggles with getting CC'd and just kited around. And the really nice thing about these 3 items is they all cost 3,100, which is really nice. On this patch, I see Sterak's the same way as I see Black Cleaver, where I just want this item every single game that I play Urgot. Alright, moving on to 4th item, this is where things get pretty situational. You want to be thinking about whether you need MR or armor. In most games, I feel like I need MR at 4th item, so I'll usually go Spirit Visage. The reason I like Spirit Visage on Urgot is because it helps out your E shield, it helps out your Sterak shield, and it helps out your Triumph heal. And it's even better to consider this item if you have an enchanter on the team, like an Iron Jungle or just any enchanter support. For the other 2 magic resist options in this build, we have Abyssal Mask. I would only buy this item if I have a lot of AP champions on my team. I think it's very niche. And then we also have Force of Nature. I would only buy Force of Nature if they have a lot of little magic damage, like if they don't have a lot of burst. Because basically with Force of Nature now, it takes a long time to stack up. So if they have a lot of burst AP damage, then they're going to kill you before it stacks up. But if they have a lot of AD champions that are building like low magic damage items, because a lot of the AD items do like a little bit of magic now, so that can stack up your Force of Nature. Or if they just have mages that have a lot of burns that do damage over time that can stack up your Force of Nature, then it can also be pretty good. For the last item in the build, I'll either go Randuin's Omen or Guardian Angel. I like Randuin's Omen when they have a lot of physical auto attackers and if they have people building crit, or if they have a crit ADC that's really fed. The active is also pretty nice on this because it gives you another way to slow people down and helps out with getting kited. I like to go Guardian Angel when I'm really fed and I have a lot of kills just to get more damage and keep my snowball going. Another thing to consider with Guardian Angel is sometimes you want to buy a stopwatch for a really important Baron or Dragon fight if you're sitting on around 750 gold. And I've had games where that stopwatch completely turns a team fight around. I used to not like Guardian Angel very much on Urgot, but I've changed my mind on it because what happens in a lot of team fights is you can E and then you end up dying and your Guardian Angel is 4.5 seconds of stasis. So that stasis time is buying time for your E to come back off cooldown, and I'll usually get a second E in the team fight, which is pretty nice. So this is the carry damage build that I've really been liking on this patch. The things I try to think about when considering to go for this build are how good I'm doing in the lane phase. Am I getting kills? Am I getting turret platings? Farming good? These are all things to consider. Lethality builds do way better when you're snowballing and you're not starved for gold. I also try to think about the enemy team comp. If they have champions like Vayne, Camille, Fiora, any percent HP damage champions, and just champions that are going to shred a tank build, it's nice to go for this build and just be like a little bit squishier and try to take them out before they kill you. Also, because I go Mythic 2nd or 3rd item, I have time to think about if my carries are doing really good or if they're doing bad. Sometimes I'll go for a tank build if my mid and ADC are popping off, and then I can just be frontline. But if I feel we need damage, maybe the ADC is not doing too well, then I'll go for this damage build instead and try to carry. If you don't need the resistances, there are a few situational damage options here. I like Titanic Hydra as a 4th item if I'm doing good in the game and just want more damage. I've moved Titanic Hydra out of my core builds because Cleaver and Sterak's are just too good on this patch. I do like it situationally as a 4th or 5th item right now because you have a lot of gold income at this point, so you can get it very quickly, and it gives you 60 AD, 500 HP, and a bunch of on-hit damage if you buy it at 4th item. It also allows you to push side lanes very quick and rotate or TP into a team fight without giving up too much CS. The other damage option here is Hullbreaker, which got buffed on this patch. It gives 5% movement speed and 10 extra AD now at the cost of a 200 gold increase. This can be a good option if you plan on split pushing a lot, or you have to match another split pusher, such as like Tryndamere, Yorick, Fiora. Any champion that likes to split 24/7, this can be a pretty nice option. It can also be good against champions that struggle to clear up that buffed up cannon minion, such as Kennen. And overall, Hullbreaker is just really cheap, so it can be a good alternative if you don't like Titanic Hydra. The last situational damage item I consider is Sherildia's Grudge, and I only build this item if they have 1 to 2 tanks usually, and I have to be really fed in the match as well. Keep in mind this item works off your passive shotguns since they count as abilities, so you can get a lot of slows off your shotguns, which is nice. I just find this item to be really high risk, high reward, since it's very easy to get bursted down whenever you buy Grudge. Moving on to build number 2, this is a Draintank Juggernaut build, which is currently my favorite build for Urgot right now. The core is going to be Cleaver into Gore Drinker into Sterak's Gauge. I've been running this build when they have 3 to 4 melee champions, and if they have 4 melee champions, this build feels extremely strong. It's also really good if they don't have a lot of burst damage because you're just a drain tank with the Omnivamp from the Gore Drinker. For the situational items here, I really like Stoneplate 4th item in this build because you need resist at this point, and between the Sterak's and Stoneplate shield, you have so much survivability, which means you can get multiple Gore Drinker actives off, as well as multiple Urgot E's off in a team fight. For the last item, I like Titanic Hydra or Thornmail or Force of Nature, depending on what the game calls for. And I think it's also really nice if you can run conditioning in your rune setup in this build. Also, do keep in mind with Gore Drinker active, it does heal you more based on your missing HP, so you do want to try to wait to use the active. I usually use it when I drop a little bit below half HP. You don't want to use it right when you're about to die usually, because it does take about a second for that heal to actually go through after you press the active. Sometimes I also use it just for extra burst damage in the combo, because you can use it right as you E on somebody and it flows really nicely with the combo because it goes off while your other abilities are going off. Like, it doesn't interrupt your other abilities, so it just flows really nicely. Moving on to build number 3, we have a tank build, and this is going to be Cleaver into Sterax into Jackshow, and alternatively you can also do Radiant Virtue in place of Jackshow and also Even Shroud. Jackshow is really good if you're just playing for yourself only. Radiant Virtue is good if you want to play for the team, give them some heals, support them. I usually do Radiant if I'm not doing very good in the match, and I'll just try to heal my team and hope they can carry. And Even Shroud can be an option if the enemy team just has a ton of CC. Also, you can go Mythic second in the build, but I like to go Sterax second usually just because Sterax is so good on this patch. And then for the last 2 situational items, again, I consider Spirit Visage, Guardian Angel, Titanic Hydra. All of these can be good. Stoneplate can be good if they have a lot of mixed damage, but I think it's sometimes a little bit overkill with the Jackshow. It's a little bit too much tankiness in my opinion, so I like to go more for like a damage HP option, because Jackshow itself gives you a lot of tank stats, and then the Mythic passive is also going to give you more resist. I haven't really done this build too much on this patch, but I used to do it on the last patch and it was performing really good for me. The reason if you guys see me not do this build too much is just because I like playing more of a damage Urgot, and there's been a lot of new items to test out with the Yumu's and the Gore Drinker build. I really like those 2 builds right now, but this is still a good option for the people that do like a tankier Urgot, so I did want to include it in the guide. That's going to do it for my top 3 builds, guys. I'll show every build here on screen with tips of when to buy them. Feel free to pause the video here if you need to. And also, I do want to mention I stream 5 days a week over on Twitch if you want to come hang out. We have an amazing community over there, and I also read every YouTube comment, so let me know if you guys have any questions. I'm always happy to answer. Alright, thanks for watching, guys, and happy Urgotting.